Hello and welcome. This is Matthias 76, and together we are decoding the deception. Together we're going deep in the Word of God. And today we're picking up with where we left off. We are in Daniel 4. We're working through the book of Daniel. We had just finished in this series 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. Those books talk a lot about the end times. Daniel talks and teaches a great deal about the end times. We are also concurrently putting out things from the book of Matthew. Now, in Matthew, we're not quite to the stuff at the end of Matthew where Jesus spends a lot of time teaching about the end times. And we are also working on, ever so slowly, it's been a labor of love and it takes a lot of time. We have 45 videos on the book of Revelation, and that's out there on the playlist too. You can get to all of those. We're here on our homepage. Right here, Bible videos. You can get to all the different series that we have done right there. You can find them all, or you can find us where you're listening now, probably on BitChute or GabTV. That's the two places I've settled on to put these videos out. That is a challenge, where to put the videos, because as YouTube has turned into the strong arm of the fascist regime over information, all of these other venues have popped up. And I've tried different ones. The ones that I get a response on are BitChute and GabTV. So those are the places you will always be able to find me. I've tried others and just didn't get traction and moved on. But as I said, we are today studying in the book of Daniel. So let's get going with that. So this is King Nebuchadnezzar right after the event with the huge golden statue that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow down and worship, and he threw them in the fiery furnace. And God saved them, just as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had said that he would. So now, at the beginning of chapter 4, we've got Nebuchadnezzar praising God. And we want to be very deliberate in how we look at this and see exactly what it is he's saying. And we're going to need to do that thing where we put on our ancient worldview glasses and understand Nebuchadnezzar's words in his context, in his time. Because if we look at it from our context, the way we use language, the way we think, and those two are connected. And most of us, and especially an American audience, and I do have listeners around the world, but those who are around the world will probably agree with this readily. We in America are, by and large, we speak one language. We speak English, and we speak our English. We don't speak the Queen's English. We don't speak the Queen's English that's used in Australia. We speak English. But our thought patterns and the way we think are tied directly to the language that we use. So because we only speak one language, we have a hard time understanding how different thought in different languages, how that's connected. People in Europe, most of them are multilingual, especially on the continent. They're multilingual. They understand that French people think differently than German people. And it's not, it is related to the language. It is both shaped by the language and it is reflected in the language. So taking that concept, I don't want to go off into a long excursus into linguistics and philology and all that stuff. Taking that thought, though, here, the way Nebuchadnezzar thought, the way he viewed, perceived, and thought of the world is entirely different than you do. Other than gravity and death, our thought systems don't have a lot in common. So we have to work to understand what it is he's saying when he says these words. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion endures from generation to generation. What he's doing here, let's jump into this. Let's talk first about to all peoples, nations, languages that dwell on the earth. With this, he is making a proclamation for the whole world, and by and large, what they knew of the world, he controlled it, or at least he had great influence there. Now, today, when a leader wants to make a proclamation, they may have a press conference and do it themselves. They may have their press person speak for them and put this out there. Then in Nebuchadnezzar's time, they did things differently. They would write it in stone, and this is in Aramaic. It is not in the Babylonian Sumerian cuneiform that they spoke. This is in Aramaic, because Aramaic was the language of international commerce, business, ruling, all of that. So he would put it on what's called stele or stele. One of these things, it'll pop up over here on the right, hopefully populate. There it is. A big stone tablet, a pillar, and it's got a picture on the top, and this is one from Babylon. And then here, if you were to zoom in really close, which I can't here, there's writing all over it. So the decree would be put here, and this part would be down in the ground. They would make one of these or several of these to put in different parts of the province, their provinces, this important decree that he is sharing. And it's going to be about what is to come, not about what happened. This is about this event with another dream that he has that's going to be put there. But he calls God the Most High God. Now, when you hear that, where does your mind go? We go, oh, he must have been won over by what he's experienced, and he's become a believer in Yahweh. And that's not the case. All he's saying is, I've come to realize that in the pantheon of gods, because he believed, and we'll talk more about this, but he believed in the pantheon of gods, and what he experienced, what he saw, and realistically, he saw it repeatedly, led him to believe that Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, was the Most High God. He was more powerful than his own God. Who was his God? His God was Marduk. We talked about that last time. His God was Marduk. And he's saying that Yahweh is greater than Marduk. What isn't he saying? And this is important. It's not just what they say, it's what they don't say. And I'll give you an example of that. The Pope will speak. The Pope, and understanding how papal doctrine and teaching and politics work takes a lot of effort, is very convoluted and involved, and has 1,000 years of history, more than 1,000 years of history. The Pope will speak and say something, and what he says sounds like he's contradicting things that are official Roman Catholic doctrine, official decrees that other popes have made. And when he says it, most of the time, it means nothing. Because in their scheme, in their system, unless he is sitting in the chair in St. Peter's Basilica, under that beautiful ceiling done by Michelangelo, unless he's sitting there, it's not doctrine. He's just spewing thought. When he sits there, that's where the term ex cathedra comes from the chair. When he speaks from the chair, it's official doctrine. Okay? So you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention. Is he really undoing the doctrine that says that anyone who believes that they're saved by grace without works is damned to hell eternally, which was what was decreed at the Council of Trent about 128 times? No. When he talks about grace, when they made Martin Luther a saint, for goodness sakes, they damned Martin Luther to hell eternally. They didn't change that. So here, back to our day. This isn't our day. Back to whatever, 570 BC. He's not saying that Marduk isn't the God he worships, reveres, and serves, because he doesn't say it. He's just saying he's realized that this Yahweh guy, he's really big and he's really powerful. How great are his signs? How mighty are his wonders? His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. His dominion endures from generation to generation. That almost sounds like he's quoting Deuteronomy 4:34, where it says pretty much the same thing. But it's limited. He's not confessing faith. He's just talking about who he is and how awesome he is. He's a really powerful, cool God. I've seen it. And now I'm going to tell you, and I'm putting it on this big stone pillar, so it'll always be there. This is how impressive this God is. See, now this thing, Nebuchadnezzar's second dream, it makes you think we're moving on to something else. No, this is the thing that impressed him, that had him make this decree to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell on the earth. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and prospering in my palace. If you really just read that and pay attention, it sounds a little bit egotistical. He's kind of boasting a little bit, isn't he? One thing for sure, if you go through and study everything about Nebuchadnezzar, he didn't lack for ego. He was quite impressed with himself. And here, let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. When God blesses you, when he blesses you with skills, when he blesses you with abilities, when he blesses you with success, do you know what it's really easy to do? To think it's me. It's my doing. That's what it is. And when we go there, because God loves us, he'll humble us. He'll humble us. So always remember, it's about him. It's about his blessing. It's about what he bestows to us, because all the good stuff, it comes from him. And Nebuchadnezzar certainly didn't operate with that modality of thinking. It was all about him. He did this cool stuff. He conquered. He whipped the Assyrians and the Egyptians at the same time. He built the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was all a him thing. Why? Well, obviously, I can conquer all these people. I can do whatever I want. That's the way he thought. And that's what this dream is about. Now, I'm going to warn you in advance, meant to do this at the beginning. We're going to go so far into this, and then we're going to hit a watcher wall. That's what I'm going to call it this morning. We're going to hit the watchers, and we're going to take a right turn and talk about that. Then next week, probably, we'll come back and finish up this whole dream and how it plays out, because the watchers are very, very important. And for the most part, we don't understand it really well. And there's plenty of stuff out there on the internet. We want to make sure that we've got it correct. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and prospering in my palace. I figure that's how Bill Gates kills time, or Bezos when he's not flying off to space or whatever. Or is that, yeah, Bezos. No, that's Musk, whoever, whatever. I saw a dream that made me afraid as I lay in my bed, and the fancies and the visions of my head alarmed me. Again, we talked about this before with the first dream that he had. Fear wasn't something with which he was really familiar. He was familiar with it as an operational concept, what he instilled in others. And I think when we talked about this the first time with the first dream, it's like the mobster De Niro plays and Analyze This. You don't hear the word no very often, do you? Yeah, it's usually like, no, don't hurt me, don't kill me. No. Fear is something he put on other people. And that's hard for any of us to get our minds around. This guy had been used by God, raised up by God. And you read through the prophets, it's very obvious. He'd been raised up by God to accomplish God's purposes. You know why Nebuchadnezzar was so mighty, so great, so awesome, so wonderful? Because God wanted to use him to punish Judah. He wanted to bring his children low so that he could save them. Because if he didn't do something really drastic to intervene, they were heading straight for hell in a handbasket in a big, big way. Go read Jeremiah. Go read Isaiah. They were a mess. And it took this, hauling them off into captivity, killing a bunch of them, hauling them off into captivity, leveling Jerusalem in order to get them to wake up and repent. That was the only reason Nebuchadnezzar was great and mighty. Just like the only reason Pharaoh and Egypt were great and mighty was because God wanted to use them. The Lord holds the king's heart in his hand, and like the rivers of water, he turns it wheresoever he will. Why do nations wax and wane? Why do they rise and fall? Because God decrees it. But they never think that's what's going on. They think, like Muhammad Ali, I am the greatest. I'm so pretty. Nobody can hit me. I'm so pretty. That's Nebuchadnezzar. Go pull up a clip of Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, back in the day, and that's the way Nebuchadnezzar thought of himself. But this made him afraid. And if you've never known fear, real fear, fear is unsettling. We're used to it. There are all kinds of things that scare me. I thought the most absurd thing that was around for the longest time was that stupid thing back in the 90s. No fear. No fear. No, it was absurd. Everybody's afraid. Everybody's afraid of all kinds of things. This guy never had to worry about that. Fear was a new thing, and he'd experienced it once before, but it didn't take. And he's experiencing it again now. But remember, fear is something that's felt by the weak, not by the mighty. The bear, the great big grizzly bear, the Kodiak bear up there in Alaska, does not know what fear is. It doesn't. As I lay on my bed, and the fancies and the visions of my head alarmed me. So I made a decree, sound familiar, that all the wise men of Babylon should be brought before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. So same thing again, he's calling them all together. He's not going to put the same kind of restrictions or demands on them this time, but he's calling them all together. Then the magicians, the enchanters, the Chaldeans, the astrologers came in, and I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation. And this list, this litany of the roll call, the roll call of who all comes It's all the people who were the advisors, the viziers, whatever you want to call it. And the Chaldeans were the guys who later, the term can be confusing. If you go to look it up in a Bible dictionary or whatever, it's used a lot of different ways because it had different meanings in different times. At one time, it was a term that was used for the people of Babylon, but it came to be refined down to the guys who became astrologers. And for them, astrology and astronomy, same thing. Astrology, and I'm not saying that they were astrophysicists and worked at JPL or anything like that, but they knew the stars very well, but they understood the stars to give signs, to show things. And lo and behold, they did, because why did those Chaldeans, that's what they would have been called in Aramaic, why did those Chaldeans, magi, come to the birth of Christ? Because they saw his star when it rose and they came to worship him. They had become believers, and that is the work of Daniel, because he is the head of all of them. And the astrologers came in, and I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation. The stage has to be set. Daniel must have been occupied somewhere because he was very high and important. None of them could interpret the dream. And so now, verse 8, at last Daniel came before me, he who is named Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And I told him the dream. So Daniel comes in, and what do you notice in how verse 8 reads at the beginning? At last, finally, in Espanol, por fin, finally, Daniel came in. And that's the one he really wanted. He really wanted Daniel. And you can hear the anticipation that that's what he wanted. At last, Daniel came in before me, he who is named Belteshazzar, after the name of my God. Belteshazzar, he put his names on these guys. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah became Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel became Belteshazzar, which means Baal, B-E-L, Baal, protect the prince. And their pantheon, the top of their pantheon was Marduk and Baal, B-E-L, Baal. So that's why it's in his name. Just like El, all the names in Hebrew that have El, Daniel, El is from Elohim, or El, which is God. That name was in there. And in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. Again, his worldview, and we'll do a little bit of a grammar spasm here in a little bit of Hebrew, and this part's in Aramaic, which is a similar language to Hebrew, but different. Okay, kind of like Portuguese and Spanish, right? Very close, but not the same. In Hebrew, the word that's most frequently by far used for God is plural. Elohim. We won't go into why. But it's plural. Elohim, the im ending at the end, is plural. Okay. So here, spirit of the holy gods, it kind of causes a challenge. And how do we understand this? Is this talking about the one true God, or the simplest way to understand it? And, Occam's razor, all things being equal, the simplest is the best. It is just Nebuchadnezzar talking in his view of things. It's Elohim, Yahweh, who's any, whatever. The spirit of the holy gods and his gods, the really powerful one, whatever. They would have just thought of it this way. It plugs right into the way they would have expressed things. And I told him the dream, saying, we're getting ready to hit that wall and take a right. O Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery is too difficult for you. Tell me the vision of my dream that I saw and their interpretation. The visions of my head as I lay in bed were these. I saw, and behold, a tree. And just so you know, we're going to read through this dream until he gets to the watchers. We'll come back and talk about the dream and how it fits into their thought system, their worldview, their cosmology next time. But we've got to read through his laying out the dream until we get to the watchers. I saw and behold a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong, and its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the heavens lived in its branches, and all flesh fed from it. And I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said thus, chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts and the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him. And let 7 periods of time pass over him. The sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will, and sets over it the lowliest of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, saw, and you, O Belteshazzar, tell me the interpretation, blah, blah, because all the other guys can't. We've got this weird thing. And what's our rule? If it's weird, it matters. If it's weird, it matters. A watcher. I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher. Now, the term, sorry, talk, get a sore throat. The term watcher, it only appears here in the Bible. It only appears here. Now, it is a term used throughout ancient literature in talking about the same entities. It's found in the text in Qumran. It's found in Enoch. It's found other places. But the term watcher is a Babylonian term. It's an Aramaic term here. And it's talking about a class of entities, spiritual beings. And when this is decreed, and again, we're talking about the interpretation of the dream next time, a watcher makes the proclamation. Where did he come down from? Heaven. He proclaims, and then this thing that happens to the tree, it getting taken down, the sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. The watchers, let's talk about it. There are a number of places in the scriptures that talk about the watchers. They're not called watchers except for here, but these entities, these spiritual beings. And it starts really all the way back in Genesis 1, where it says, let us make man, where God says, let us make man in our image. That's not a Trinitarian passage. The doctrine of the Trinity, the teaching of the Trinity hadn't been laid out yet and wouldn't for a long time. But this is talking about other spiritual beings who are created by God and who serve as his counsel. He talks about things with them. He asks them their opinion. They give counsel. Rulers have counsels, right? A president, a king has advisors. Nebuchadnezzar had his advisors. These are beings that serve this purpose in God's scheme of things. And we're going to go look at some passages. And I know that for many of you, you might have heard something about this. Maybe you know all about it. That could be. If so, it's good review. But for many of us, this is a new take on things. It's a different way of looking at things. And it takes some effort. But it's a teaching that for the most part, the Christian world has missed, has ignored for quite some time. But it was the view and understanding of the apostles and the early church and Jesus. So let's take a look at it. And we will go here first. And this is the key passage. And there is a theologian, a doctor of theology named Michael Heiser. And I do highly recommend, and when it comes to theological books, there are not a lot of them that I recommend. And that's for good reason, because oftentimes there's some interesting stuff in there, but then there's some things that I don't agree with at all. And I don't want to be coming across as condoning those. But out on my website, decodingthedeception.com, if you go to research and resources and reading, we've got secular and conspiracy books, but we've got theology and faith. And if you go there, the one at the very top, I only got two of them here, and they're both by Michael Heiser. It's called Supernatural, What the Bible Teaches About the Unseen World and Why It Matters. He's got two versions of the same book. One is for people who read Hebrew and don't mind 5,000 footnotes, and the other is for us normal folk, okay? But this book lays out very well this view and understanding that God has other spiritual beings who serve as his counsel. It's known as the heavenly host. You've heard of that. And they're not just there as the band. They're not just there playing harps and the like and singing. They are active. They are involved. Go read the book of Revelation and look at all the things that the angels do. And the terminology gets confusing. Angel, B'nai Elohim, sons of God. It can all get confusing. This book will help lay a lot of it out for you. But Deuteronomy 32, this is Moses' farewell sermon. It is the beginning of Moses' farewell sermon, and he's laying out for the children of Israel, this newly born nation, liberated and heading into the promised land, who they are, where they came from, what they're about. And he says, when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples. Most High, that's God, just like the way Nebuchadnezzar talks about him. He gave the nations their inheritance. For that, you need to go to Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel, when somebody else got kind of high and mighty and built a ziggurat, a tower, and God came down. He divided the nations. He divided the nations. He gave them different languages, but there was more to it than that. And the ancient people didn't have to, and the ancient always sounds condescending. The people who lived long, long, long ago, they knew this stuff. They understood it. It was part of their worldview. They knew why the Egyptians worshiped different gods. They knew why the Babylonians worshiped different gods, the Assyrians, the Hittites, the Canaanites, whoever it might be. The nations had been divided by God and assigned to the sons of God. Back to Deuteronomy 32. He fixed the borders for the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. That term is B'nai Elohim, sons. You'll see B'nai sometimes, or Ben in the name of a synagogue, maybe where you live. Ben, son. God didn't just give them a different language. He put other spiritual entities in charge of them, gods. And in their worldview, you have to understand this, God simply means spirit being, But one is the Most High, one is God Most High, one is God Almighty, one is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, all that stuff. He's different. He's different. He's uncreated. They're all created. God made them. He created them, and he entrusted them with taking care of the nations. He had a plan, and this is a plan of salvation. Everything had gotten so sick and twisted again after the ark and the flood and all of that. And now they were trying to build a tower to heaven and become God for themselves, basically. And there were spiritual beings who had fallen as well. Genesis 6, 1 through 4. And they were leading this mess. So God divided the nations up, 70 of them. Think of how many times that number 70 comes up. 70 of them, and put these spirit beings who were still obedient to him. There must be a lot of them, because some had already fallen. Satan had already fallen. He put them in charge of the nations, according to the numbers of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted inheritance. He found him in a desert land, in the howling waste of the wilderness, Ur of the Chaldeans. He encircled him, he cared for him, and kept him as the apple of his eye, like an eagle that stirs up its nest, that flutters over its young, spreading out its wings, catching them, bearing them on its pinions. The Lord alone guided him. Him is Israel. Him is the nation that came from that one guy that he called. Genesis 11. Guess what comes after Genesis 11? This is going to be a stunner. Are you ready? I will blow your minds. Genesis 12. But what's in Genesis 12? The call of Abraham, the father of the new nation that came from Abraham's loins, even though he was old and his wife old and past the age. It was all God's doing, his grace, his mercy. And then Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob went down into Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, went down into Egypt, and from there, God went and got his son. It was incubated there, so to say. And he came and he told Pharaoh, I've come for my son. You're abusing him, and I'm here to get him, and you can't stop me. And Israel was birthed out of Egypt. All of this stuff ties together. And so when Moses, the old man, is getting ready to die and he's preaching his final sermon, this is where he goes. Talk about it being a part of the fabric of their reality. This is what he's reminding them of. God did this. He divided the nations. But you were special. You were different. He called you out, and it was through them that he intended to save the nations. Because once the Messiah came, once the Son of God came and lived and died and paid for the sins of the world, then that message of salvation was to go where? Pentecost, to all the nations, the same nations. Go out and bring them back. That was always the plan. And part of that plan is God choosing. He doesn't need help. He doesn't need advisors, but it seems that he likes it. He likes it. He likes counsel. He likes interaction. He likes community. And I'm not going to go into what his plans probably were for us, where he came in the garden with Adam and Eve and had what? Fellowship, community, probably talked about how they were going to build this place out. The garden wasn't the whole world. It was a small area. How they were going to take it on, move on, what it was going to look like, how it was going to be developed. God likes community. He likes counsel. So he put some of his counsel in charge of the nations, but they decided that they kind of like that position. They like that power. They didn't want to give it up. And so they rebelled. And that will take us to Psalm 82. Oh, not 150. Psalm 82. This is God, and it's a short psalm. Tell you to go read Psalm 82, and you're like, oh no, whole psalm is only a few verses. This is God excoriating and condemning. It's a judgment scene. And there are all these different things in the scripture that are a courtroom scene. Well, who's the court? Who's the court? The heavenly host, God's counsel. They are there. And when it's a king, and God is king, he is the ruler and he's also the judge. So here, this is a courtroom scene, a throne room scene. And he's decreeing judgment on those gods, the B'nai Elohim, his created spiritual entities who decided that being Ra, or being Marduk, or Apollo, or Zeus, or Baal, or Asherah was really cool. It was a whole lot better than playing second fiddle to God Most High. I kind of like this. They think I'm the big cheese. I'm going to run with it. That's exactly what happened. God has taken his place where? In the divine council, in the midst of the gods. He holds judgment. One more thing on that with the word God. When you hear God, G-O-D, you think of omnipotent, eternal, all-knowing, holy, just, infinite, all of those things. Their word, God, simply meant spiritual being. It's used of Samuel when he's called up by from the grave by the witch of Endor. He was a spirit being then. He's called an Elohim. So their way of using the word is different than our way of using the word. It's not a name, it's a category. It is a species of spiritual being. in the midst of the gods, these other spiritual beings he created as his counsel, he holds judgment. And now this is what he's saying to Baal, Ra, Marduk, Zeus, Apollo. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Selah, which just means think about it. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. And what's wrong with, and make no mistake, these same entities, Ra, Marduk, Baal, Asherah, they're still in charge today. Why do you think our world is such a hot mess? All of these people who are into this horrible, sick, twisted worship, whom do they worship? Whom do they serve? These guys haven't gone away. They're judged, and that's what Psalm 82 is going to tell us. But it hasn't happened yet. The enactment of that judgment, that they, like men, will die, they're going to be thrown into the lake of fire with the dragon and the beast and the false prophet. But what's wrong with our world today? What's wrong? What don't they do? Or what do they do? How long will you judge? Just apply this to today in the United States, in Australia, in England, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Peru. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Doesn't that sound like our court system today? Doesn't that sound like those who rule today? It's about bribes. It's about power. It's about serving their dark lords. Give justice to the weak. That's why he put them there. He's saying, this is what I put you there to do. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. It's like when a father and mother go away on vacation and they leave their college-age kid at home to take care of things. And they come home. He's been on a 1-week bender. The dog hasn't been fed. The grass hasn't been cut. And there are empty beer cans and bongs everywhere in the house. What have you been doing? Who do you think you are? I left you in charge of my stuff to take care of it the way I told you to take care of it. It was a privilege, and you just ran amok. Rescue the weak and needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. I saw a meme, and you've all probably seen it. How is it we can vaccinate the world, but we can't feed the hungry? How can we do the one and not the other? How can we stick this death soup into people's arms all over the world in a matter of months, but we can't feed the starving? Wow, I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because this is who these guys are, and this is what they're about. This is whom they serve. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. He's talking about the people under their care. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. You were supposed to lead them, guide them, school them. And instead, they're a mess. They're in the dark, and it's your fault because I left you in charge. Everything was good. I left you in charge, and you blew it. I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you, you spiritual beings. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. Rulers, they come and they go. They come and they go. They die. Nebuchadnezzar, he's going to die. Darius, he's going to die. They all do. So will you, because you're under my control, just like they're under my control. But the judgment on you is greater, because to whom much is entrusted, there's a higher level of expectation. There's a higher standard. Arise, O God. And this is the psalmist at the end praising him. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit what? Inherit what? The nations. Every time you see the word nations, every time you hear it in the Bible, stop and think. That's a big wake up. This is about this stuff. This is about this stuff. This divine counsel and how God operates and how he works, because that's how he chooses to work. Now we're going to go take a look at Psalm, and this is all still, we're in Daniel 4, The watchers came, the watchers spoke, the watchers decreed. A quick look at Psalm 89, 5. Let the heavens praise your wonders, O Lord, your faithfulness in the assembly of the holy ones, the watchers, the B'nai Elohim. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings, there's lots of them. There's good, there's bad. There are those who are faithful to him. Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord, a God greatly to be feared? Where? In the council of the holy ones, and awesome above all who are around him. Now, we're going to go, because we're talking about this watcher thing. And it's by the really funky thing is, it's by the decree of the watchers. Well, why do the watchers get to decree anything? Kind of interesting. This is a section, and again, on the scale of if it's weird, it's important. We're spiking about an 8.5 on the weird meter here in 1 Kings. It's a throne room scene again, and God is doing something with this council, and it's just interesting. I'm running out of time, so I can't go into too much detail. And Micaiah said, therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab? Remember Ahab? Ahab, really bad guy. Mount Carmel, 450 prophets of Baal. Jezebel, his wife. Who will entice Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said one thing, and another said another. This is the divine council, the watchers, the B'nai Elohim. They're mulling it over. Oh, how can we do that? How can we get him to go up there and do that? Because God wants him to fall at Ramoth Gilead. Go fight a battle he won't win at Ramoth Gilead. Then a spirit came forward and said, and stood before the Lord and saying, I will entice him. And the Lord said to him, by what means? Think of this as every boardroom meeting you've ever been in at work. How are we going to do this? How are we going to make it work? By what means? He said, I will go out and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets, all 450 prophets of Baal, probably. And he said, you are to entice him and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. Now, therefore, behold, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets, and the Lord has declared disaster for you. And Micaiah was talking to Ahab. It's kind of interesting. God asked his council, the watchers, if we want to use that term, which is used in Daniel, how do you think we should do this? They came up with an idea, and he said, run with it. If you own your bill and you own Bill's widgets and gadgets, and you ask your managers, what's the best way to do this? And they come up with an idea. You're getting them involved. You're allowing them to participate. And you say, okay, that's good. Go with it. Are you still in charge? Yes. Are you still responsible and accountable? Yes. God operates the same way. So now we're going to go back to Daniel 4. And here we have the sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will and sets over it the lowliest of men. Why was it a watcher who came in this dream and made this decree? And it's by the decree of the watchers. God said, hey, I'm going to let you guys run up with this one. Figure it out. Come up with a plan. Okay, that's good. Go. And so when they get there, they say, this is by the decree of the watchers. Now, again, our time is all but up. Interesting. I just did Michael Heiser would call it a mad dash through this material. Did it half an hour. These people didn't have to have any of this explained to them. A watcher came down, a heavenly being, a spirit being came down. Okay, yeah, that's the way things work. But to us, we have to get our minds around it. We have to work to understand it. And what you will find, and I highly recommend, go get that book, Supernatural by Michael Heiser. All you got to do is say that into your phone and Amazon will pull it up and there it is. Also, go out on YouTube. Michael Heiser has all kinds of good stuff on the unseen realm. I got to put links to that on my website. I got to do that. Michael Heiser's videos on the unseen realm, on the nations, all of that stuff, he makes it very easy to understand. He goes through it in much more length than I was able to do. But I didn't want to pass this up where we come here to the watchers that they're right here and not explain it. To just say, after everything I've just laid out, and if it's new to you, I understand your head's going, and you're thinking, I think maybe this guy's about off his nut by about half a mile. If I just said, the watchers, they're spiritual beings. It's like an angel came down. Would I have done that justice? No, I would have really shortchanged it. Okay. There's a lot to this stuff. And when you get your mind around this reality, a biblical reality, that there are spiritual entities who have rebelled. It's much more involved than just the simple concept of demons. I'm not saying there aren't demons. The simple concept of demons, it's much more involved than that. They're much more powerful than that. Just as with anything else, there are ranks and authorities. There are throne guardians. That's probably, almost certainly, what Lucifer was. A shining, shimmering one. A lot to that too. There's a lot to this, but if we really understand this supernatural view, the unseen realm, the divine counsel, and all that relates to it, we get so much more out of the Old Testament, and we get great insight into our world today, because these are the forces. And if you don't think that Paul talked about this stuff, like in Ephesians 6, where he says our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against what? The powers and authorities and principalities. Where? In the heavenly realms, in the spiritual realms. Paul understood this stuff. It was his worldview. It's not our worldview. So it is incumbent on us to learn, to grow, to reshape our worldview so that we can mine everything from the truth of God's word that we can. We're going to stop there because time does exist for us, unfortunately, and that means that we have to stop. And my voice can only go for so long without a break, and so we have to stop. That's why speakers give you a break and say you can go stretch their legs. That's not what it's about. They don't care about your hind end feeling like it's fallen asleep an hour ago. They need a break so that they can stop talking. Little insight. Want to thank you for listening. I really hope, I pray that this teaching is a blessing to you. If it is, please smash that like button, feed the algorithm monster. It makes a difference. Subscribe to this channel, and when you subscribe, make sure and hit that notification bell. That way you're made aware when we put out new content. Share this video with somebody else. There's somebody you know who would find this interesting, find it to be a blessing. Share it with them, put it out on your social media feed. And finally, drop by right here and pay us a visit. at decodingthedeception.com. If you know our name, hey, you can find us. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception. Together, we are going deep in the Word of God. God bless and have a great day.